The training facility on station hummed with the sound of combat simulators and weapons fire. Commander adjusted her grip on the plasma rifle, sweat beading on her forehead despite the climate-controlled environment. Around her, cadets from a dozen different species practiced their combat maneuvers under the watchful eyes of their instructors. The Galactic Defense Academy had been humanity's ticket into the wider universe. When Earth finally made contact with the Confederation of Worlds 3 years ago, humans were considered a curiosity at best. Most species saw them as physically weak, emotionally unstable, and prone to violence without purpose. The fact that humans had spent fighting among themselves only reinforced these stereotypes. Had been among the first wave of human recruits accepted into the academy. At 25, she was older than most cadets, but her military background from Earth's Special Forces had earned her a place in the advanced program. Still, she faced constant skepticism from her alien classmates and instructors alike. "Pathetic form, human," growled a 7-foot-tall warrior whose species had dominated the Academy's combat rankings for decades. His reptilian features twisted into what might have been amusement as he watched complete her shooting exercise. "Your people should stick to menial labor. Leave the fighting to real warriors." Lowered her weapon and turned to face the hulking alien. The other cadets had stopped their exercises to watch. This wasn't the first time he'd made such comments, but something in his tone today felt different, more aggressive, more personal. "Problem with my scores?" asked calmly, nodding toward the holographic display that showed her hitting 97% of her targets with precision shots. It was the highest score of the day, though she didn't mention that. His laugh was a harsh, grating sound. "Machines can hit targets too. Real combat requires strength, endurance, the will to crush your enemies with your bare hands." He flexed his massive arms, each one thicker than his torso. "Humans break easily. I've seen the footage from your world's conflicts. You hide behind technology because you're too weak to fight properly." The training hall had grown quiet. Even the instructors seemed to be watching now, though none intervened. Interspecies tensions were considered part of the training process, meant to prepare cadets for the realities of a diverse military force. "Is that a challenge?" asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her system. His yellow eyes gleamed. "Hand-to-hand combat, no weapons, no technology, just warrior against warrior." He paused, his lips pulling back to reveal sharp teeth. "Unless the human is too afraid to face a real fighter." Murmurs rippled through the assembled cadets. They were known throughout the galaxy for their combat prowess. They were stronger than humans, faster, with natural armor-like scales and claws that could tear through metal. No human had ever defeated in single combat, at least not in any recorded match at the Academy. Felt the weight of every gaze in the room. She knew this moment would define not just her own reputation, but how humans were perceived by every cadet present. Some of these beings would go on to command fleets or lead planetary defenses. Their opinions of humanity's military capabilities could shape interstellar politics for generations. "Accept," she said simply. The combat ring activated with a soft chime, energy barriers rising to contain the fight. Standard Academy protocol required medical supervision for interspecies combat, and noticed several instructors moving closer with emergency medical equipment. The sight didn't exactly boost her confidence. Entered the ring first, rolling his massive shoulders and cracking his knuckles with sounds like breaking branches. At 7 feet tall and weighing what estimated to be close to 400 pounds, he was an intimidating sight. His natural scales would provide protection against most strikes, and his clawed hands could inflict devastating damage. Stepped into the ring and immediately felt the difference in scale. She was 5'6" and athletic, but standing across from the warrior made her feel like a child facing an adult. The smart play would be to forfeit, to claim injury or equipment malfunction. No one would blame her for backing down from such an obviously one-sided fight. Instead, she fell into a combat stance, her body automatically adjusting to the techniques drilled into her during years of Special Forces training. Her instructor's words echoed in her mind. "Size and strength matter, but they're not everything. Speed, technique, and most importantly, thinking 3 moves ahead will beat raw power every time." "Begin," called Instructor Vex, a mantis-like being who served as the Academy's head of combat training. Charged immediately, exactly as had expected. The fighting style was based on overwhelming force and intimidation. They relied on their natural advantages to crush opponents quickly, rarely bothering with complex tactics or defensive techniques. The charge and lets momentum carry him past her. She struck out with a quick jab to his kidneys, a move that would have dropped a human opponent. Against scaled hide, it barely registered. He spun faster than she'd anticipated, his backhand catching her across the chest and sending her stumbling backward. The impact drove the air from her lungs and sent pain shooting through her ribs. His casual strike had more force behind it than a professional boxer's haymaker. If she tried to trade blows with him, she would lose quickly and decisively. The pressed his advantage, advancing with measured steps. His yellow eyes held a predatory gleam and could see that he was enjoying himself. To him, this wasn't a real fight. It was a demonstration of superiority, a chance to put humanity in its place before an audience of future military leaders. That confidence, realized, might be his weakness. Lunged forward with another devastating swing, his clawed fist cutting through the air where his head had been a split second earlier. She ducked and rolled, using her smaller size to stay mobile while studying his movements. Though was fast for his size, but his attacks followed predictable patterns. He fought like someone who had never faced serious resistance, never needed to adapt his tactics mid-combat. "Stand still and fight," roared, frustration creeping into his voice as continued to evade his strikes. Several of his fellow cadets in the audience hissed their approval, but noticed that cadets from other species were watching with more interest than she'd expected. Maybe they weren't all convinced this would be a quick victory. Feinted left, then dropped low and swept its legs. Her technique was perfect, the kind of move that would have sent most opponents crashing to the ground. Against this incredible mass and low center of gravity, it accomplished nothing except earning her a knee strike that caught her in the shoulder and spun her around. She rolled with the impact, converting the momentum into distance rather than letting it drive her to the ground. Pain flared through her shoulder, but nothing felt broken. Yet, she needed to change tactics and fast. "Human endurance is a myth," announced to the crowd, apparently unbothered by his failure to end the fight quickly. "They tire easily, break under pressure. Watch how she already slows." But wasn't slowing. If anything, her movements were becoming more fluid, more precise. Years of training had taught her to manage pain and fatigue, to use her opponent's expectations against them, and was doing exactly what she'd hoped, underestimating her completely. She began to circle him more aggressively, forcing him to turn and track her movement. This massive frame was built for power, not sustained motion. She could see sweat beginning to form on his scaled brow despite the cool air of the training facility. "You fight like prey," snarled, launching another series of powerful strikes. "No honor, no courage, typical human cowardice." The insult stung but pushed the emotion aside. Anger would make her sloppy and she couldn't afford any mistakes. Instead, she filed the comment away and continued her assessment. Was breathing harder now, his movements just slightly less crisp than they'd been at the start. His species might be physically superior, but they weren't used to extended combat. Their battles were typically decided in the first few brutal exchanges. Struck again, this time targeting the soft tissue between neck scales. Her strike was precise and fast, designed to disrupt his breathing rather than cause major damage. The stumbled slightly, more from surprise than pain, but it was the first time she'd managed to truly affect him. "Lucky shot," he wheezed, but there was less certainty in his voice now. The assembled cadets were murmuring among themselves. What had started as an expected demonstration of dominance was turning into something more complex. The human wasn't winning, but she wasn't losing as quickly as everyone had predicted either. Pressed her advantage, launching a series of quick strikes targeting pressure points and joint connections. None of them were powerful enough to seriously injure the massive alien, but each one disrupted his balance or breathing just slightly. She was performing surgery with violence, each cut precise and purposeful. His frustration boiled over. He abandoned any pretense of technique and simply tried to grab her, his massive hands seeking to crush her in a bear hug that would end the fight instantly. For a moment, it looked like he might succeed. His clawed fingers brushed her uniform as she twisted away, close enough that she could smell his alien musk. But had been expecting this. Desperation move left him overextended and off balance. She stepped inside his reach and drove her elbow upward with all her strength, targeting the nerve cluster she'd located just below his jaw. The strike connected perfectly, sending a shock through this nervous system. His eyes widened in shock and pain. For the first time since the fight began, he staggered backward, his massive frame wavering. The crowd fell silent, stunned by the sight of the seemingly invincible warrior showing genuine distress. But wasn't finished. She'd identified his weakness now, the gap in his natural armor where his neck met his torso. The scales there were thinner, more flexible, protecting vital blood vessels and nerve pathways. It was a target that required perfect timing and positioning to reach, but she'd been systematically setting up the angle of attack for the past several minutes. Tried to recover his guard, but the nerve strike had left him disoriented. His movements were slower, less coordinated. Could see uncertainty in his yellow eyes for the first time. The possibility of defeat, which had seemed impossible just minutes earlier, was suddenly very real. "Impossible," whispered one of the cadets in the audience. "He's the strongest warrior in our class. How is she?" "She's thinking," said a voice from the crowd. Couldn't identify the speaker, but the observation was accurate. While had relied on his natural advantages, she'd been analyzing his every movement, building a mental map of his strengths and weaknesses, waiting for the perfect moment to exploit what she'd learned. The realization seemed to dawn on as well. His massive chest heaved as he fought to regain his composure, but there was something different in his posture now. The absolute confidence was gone, replaced by the wariness of a predator who'd suddenly realized his prey might have teeth. "You cannot win," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "I am stronger, faster, tougher. One solid hit and you're finished." Wiped blood from her lip where one of his earlier strikes had connected. "You're right," she said calmly, "but you haven't managed to land that solid hit yet, have you?" The truth of her words hung in the air between them. Despite his overwhelming advantages, despite the fact that he outweighed her by more than 2-1, had failed to end the fight quickly. And every second that passed favored the human, who had designed her entire strategy around endurance and precision rather than raw power. Around the combat ring, alien cadets who had dismissed humans as weak and irrelevant were beginning to reconsider their assumptions. This wasn't the quick demonstration of species superiority they'd expected to witness. This was something else entirely. His breathing was labored now, his massive chest rising and falling as he fought to maintain his aggressive stance. The extended combat was taking its toll on his powerful but energy-intensive physiology. Meanwhile, had found her rhythm. Her movements were economical and fluid, each step calculated to maximize efficiency while minimizing energy expenditure. The crowd had grown substantially as word of the unusual fight spread through the training facility. Cadets from advanced classes had abandoned their own exercises to witness what many were calling impossible. A human holding her own against one of the Academy's most dominant warriors. "End this charade," snarled, but there was desperation beneath his bravado. He charged again, this time with less finesse and more raw fury. His clawed hands swept through the air in devastating arcs that would have torn a lesser opponent apart. Had been waiting for exactly this moment. Rage made even the most skilled fighters predictable, and was no exception. She stepped inside his wild swing, her smaller frame allowing her to occupy space he couldn't efficiently attack. Her counterstrike was perfect, a precisely angled punch to the same nerve cluster she'd targeted before, delivered with every ounce of strength her human physiology could muster. The effect was immediate and dramatic. His left arm went numb, hanging uselessly at his side as his nervous system struggled to cope with the targeted disruption. His yellow eyes widened in shock and something approaching fear. "How?" he gasped, staggering backward on unsteady legs. "Human military doctrine," replied, circling him with predatory grace. "When you can't match your enemy's strength, you study their weaknesses. Every species has pressure points, nerve clusters, structural vulnerabilities. You just have to know where to look." The revelation sent murmurs through the alien audience. Many of them came from warrior cultures that prized strength and direct confrontation. The idea of systematically analyzing an opponent to exploit biological weaknesses was foreign to their way of thinking. Tried to compensate for his disabled arm, but his balance was compromised. Pressed her advantage ruthlessly, targeting his joints and nerve pathways with surgical precision. Each strike weakened him further, disrupting his coordination and sapping his strength. "You fight without honor," accused, his voice strained with pain and exhaustion. "These are not the techniques of a true warrior." "Honor doesn't win wars," replied flatly. Effectiveness does. You wanted to see how humans fight. This is how we've survived everything our world could throw at us. We adapt. We overcome. We find a way. She struck again, this time targeting the major nerve bundle in his right leg. Collapsed to one knee, his massive frame finally betraying him. The crowd fell silent, stunned by the sight of their seemingly invincible warrior brought low by someone half his size. But wasn't finished. She'd learned enough about physiology during the fight to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. Her final attack was a precise blow to the cluster of nerves at the base of skull, not enough to cause permanent damage, but sufficient to overwhelm his nervous system completely. The giant warrior toppled forward, unconscious before he hit the training mat. The silence that followed was deafening. For long moments, nobody moved or spoke. The energy barriers around the combat ring flickered and died as Instructor Vex stepped forward to check on both combatants. "Medical assistance for Cadet," Vex announced, his mantis-like features betraying no emotion. "Temporary nerve disruption. He'll recover fully within the hour." He turned to, who was standing over her fallen opponent with calm professionalism despite the obvious pain from her own injuries. "Victory to Cadet." The announcement broke the spell. Suddenly, the training facility erupted in conversation as dozens of alien cadets processed what they'd just witnessed. Many looked shocked, some appeared thoughtful, and others seemed almost frightened. "I don't understand," said a cat-like cadet who had previously dismissed humans as soft primates. "They are the strongest warriors in the academy. How did she?" "She fought like a human," answered Vex, his compound eyes reflecting something that might have been approval. "Most species here rely on their natural advantages: strength, speed, armor, claws, venom. Humans have none of those things. Instead, they have something else entirely." "What?" asked several cadets simultaneously. "Adaptability," answered, accepting a medical scanner from one of the attendants checking her injuries. "And stubbornness. We're not the strongest or fastest species in the galaxy. We're not the or most technologically advanced. But we're very, very good at figuring out how to win against opponents who should be able to defeat us easily." Word of the fight spread through the academy with unprecedented speed. By evening, found herself something of a celebrity, though not necessarily the kind she'd wanted to be. Some cadets looked at her with newfound respect, others with suspicion or outright fear. The delegation was particularly quiet, huddling together and speaking in hushed tones whenever she passed. Himself had recovered as predicted, but he avoided eye contact and seemed diminished somehow, his usual swagger replaced by thoughtful uncertainty. 3 days later was summoned to the office of Admiral, the Academy's commandant. The massive leader was one of the most respected military minds in the Confederation, and his opinion carried tremendous weight throughout the galaxy. "Cadet," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone, "your recent performance has generated considerable discussion among the faculty." Stood at attention, unsure whether she was about to be commended or expelled. "Yes, sir. Many of my colleagues believe you represent a significant development in our understanding of human military potential," continued. "Others worry that your species' approach to combat may be problematic for unit cohesion." "Sir." The Admiral's alien features were difficult to read, but something in his posture suggested approval. "You defeated a superior opponent through analysis, preparation, and tactical thinking rather than raw physical prowess. It was an impressive display of what humans call asymmetric warfare." "Thank you, sir." "However," raised a massive hand, "there are concerns about human unpredictability. Many species view your victory as evidence that humans cannot be trusted to fight honorably." Felt her jaw tighten. "With respect, sir, honor is a luxury for those who can afford to lose. When survival is at stake, effectiveness trumps ceremony every time." Admiral was quiet for a long moment, studying her with ancient eyes that had seen countless wars across the galaxy. Finally, he spoke again. "The Confederation faces threats that our traditional military doctrines may be inadequate to address. Perhaps it's time we learned from a species that has spent its entire history finding ways to overcome impossible odds." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm recommending you for immediate promotion to the Advanced Strategic Warfare Program. Your insights into human military philosophy may prove invaluable in preparing our forces for the challenges ahead." As left the commandant's office, she reflected on how drastically her situation had changed. She'd entered the academy as a representative of humanity's desire to join the galactic community. Now, she was positioned to help reshape how that community thought about warfare itself. Behind her, the sounds of training continued, alien cadets from across the galaxy learning to fight together for their common defense. But now, mixed among the familiar sounds of conventional combat, she could hear something new. Instructors teaching the principles of asymmetric warfare, adaptive tactics, and the human approach to turning disadvantages into strengths. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to fight by the rules everyone else takes for granted.